Welcome to the Executive Eye by DRI, your lens into the world of executive leadership. Here, we bring you sharp insights, clear perspectives, and focused discussions on the trends shaping the future of business. Join us as we explore what's in view for today's leaders and tomorrow's innovators.
Everybody, welcome to the Executive Eye, the official podcast of Starfish Partners. Today, we have a very exciting topic. We will be talking about, during rough times, what separates the good teams that actually fall apart from the great teams that make it through in the very same hard times. Again, my name is Lee Martin. I am, a little bit about me, I've been with Starfish Partners as a part of the Kaye Bassman brand since 2004. So 22 years here, just had my anniversary last week. I focus primarily in our commercial building world. And so think of commercial construction with builders and general contractors. Think of commercial real estate firms. Think of sub and specialty contractors, and then construction technology firms as well. That is the world that we've played in. And for 22 years, we made it a business of being masters in those certain areas. And so it's all I know. And that's what we do from an executive recruiting perspective. This is Nathan Courville, my co-host. Nate, take it over.
Hey guys, my name's Nathan Courville. And just like Lee, I started with Kaye Bassman, a part of the Starfish families 14 years ago. Matter of fact, fun little fact, the reason I'm with the company is because of Lee Martin. I run a risk management and insurance division, head up all the M&A and executive search in the space as the practice leader and MD. To give a little context to our focus, it's insurance brokerage. So essentially the middleman between the carrier and the consumer. And so our day-to-day goes after high performers in the insurance brokerage space, typically in the sales capacity, that are big earners, but have a lot of sophistication in their deals. So what I want to focus on first off with Lee is one of the things that I'm really curious on is what separates teams that are going through hard times and that weather it well and come out on top. And so since he's been here for such a long time, we'll kind of open up with getting some insight on his experience with not only his personal team, but the construction practice and the entity as a whole. He's probably seen a lot of diversity and who's weathered that well and some of the reasons why.
Yeah, there's been iterations of my own team. The recruiting is a really crazy world because if you were to project or forecast what a team would look like over the course of even 2 to 3 years, which seems like a foreseeable future, right? You can look at a 24-month period and think that's not that far from now. I should be able to really guess how hiring would look, what size we're going to be in general. But we've had just the most tumultuous 22 years. I know that sounds wild and it's a huge body of work, but there have been huge headwinds. And so I'll use an example. In 2004, I started. I was on a team that was having record years almost every year. I elevated within the team and had an opportunity to help lead the team. And then we hit 2008, the Great Recession, through 2009. And the team disintegrated to very few of us. I remember sitting around in 2010 with 6 people left in a practice that was formerly 29 or 30 people. And inside of a year to 18 months, all of that changed. We're in a professional services world. So recruiting is crazy because you build a team and you think, this is it. This is my life. And we'll just add on to this. And at times, there are going to be other factors that can significantly impact that. So that was sort of the first version of it. And then, we decreased, we scaled back up. We had, a few different versions of the economic headwinds. And then we had the pandemic too. Shrunk back down. And I think we were under 10 people at that point. Maybe 12 to 13 people in a practice that, should be in that 30 to 40 just sheer headcount range. And so it's been interesting, keeping the team together, the team that was just me in some of those hard times, and understanding and learning from those moments when we've had to use that really rough economic time. Some people just physically cannot be here anymore because it's a commission-based business and you got to go find something that's going to provide for your family. So you can't be in recruiting, combining some of that, being introspective in those moments, thinking, how do I not have this happen again? And how do I not have the experience have people having to, in either in my jurisdiction or in our company, think about other avenues and other paths? And I think what's happened, and the pandemic's a great example of that in 2020 with COVID, and kind of how that hit us, of how we created a resiliency, we created a strategy, and we created a concept. And one of the things that I'll hold on to, and we'll probably revisit this a few times when we talk about just team stuff, Nate, is um, how valuable it is when you have the right people to handle and face those things together and find a way in a large enough organization to plug in. I think it's really crazy to say, but there were times when even in the pandemic, Nate, you and I had a conversation. What else can I do to diversify what we're doing? Do I go work in a different space entirely? Do I go help you out insurance? Remember we had this conversation. I was willing to do what I needed to do because I knew keeping my team together was important. If I had to create other revenue streams to do that, the momentum that we have, the culture, the collaboration, it's a professional service. So people and relationships, when you have the right ones, you know it, you savor that. It's a concept I learned in 2020, kind of the hard way. What was great is the hard times then followed quickly with great times because of the team staying together. So togetherness is a concept that when you have the right people, I think is something we need to latch onto. And it's something I've learned. And now having, since the pandemic, quadrupled just my headcount on my personal team, can attest to the idea that the nucleus that we already had is why the health of the total team is much better now. And why we can scale and grow, because inevitably the hard times don't last. Neither do good times. Neither do great times.
Well, there's probably a level of transparency that you're bringing to the table based off your experience to prep them for that grittiness and resilience, because it's not a matter of if it's going to happen. It's a matter of when it's going to happen. And in my world, it's a little bit different. When the economy's struggling, we're pretty foul proof. But in reality, when it happens to us, that I need to be transparent about the economics, that most of my clients are private equity backed. And so when interest rates go up, as they have over the last couple of years, you're borrowing inexpensive money. And that ultimately puts people in a position where they're going to kind of pull back on the risk threshold they have or the internal underwriting process, which ultimately means I need to do the same because there's just not as much opportunity with the client base. And so I think both of us have gone through some times in regards to having an understanding, and we probably both bring some transparency to the table for the team to understand that that's going to come. And we can get through it together instead of hiding behind it and pretending like those things don't happen, where the people that you're supporting in leadership need to be aware of that stuff. Because if it hits them like a ton of bricks and they don't know what to expect, I just don't think that's great servant leadership. It's kind of like it's all about me, and it comes by a surprise and they feel like you weren't fully transparent with them.
I agreed. And I think the understanding of, like, to your point, not shying away from what's really happening and owning it. You don't want to fail. And when you make a commitment to hire somebody, you want them to be successful. And so sometimes feeling like the support hiring can make you want to seem like you're bulletproof, and we're just not. And so I think a professional maturity inside of growing a team, and what we've learned over these many years, you 14, me 22, is you gotta let people in enough till they fully understand what they're doing. Because what I want is to replicate me. I want to be behind a group of partners doing what Lee Martin's currently doing, bigger and better than I ever have. It doesn't start once we get there. It starts now, pushing from behind, supporting them and understanding. I can't do that if they're not on the same page, And, there's that delicate balance of inspiring, leading from the front, hard charging and discipline. Some things we'll probably talk more about today. And then being a supportive ear, eye, and expert, in certain respects. And so that's, I think, the resiliency, I think a couple things coming out of that. What we're talking about is resiliency, it's transparency, it's servant leadership, when those times are hard, because the people matter more when there's not a lot of, let's face it, we're here to make money. So when the money's not like falling off the trees and everyone's got their gather bags, then it's about the tree itself and the roots and kind of how stable are we together, because that's all sometimes you have.
And not to toot our own horns, I think one thing that we have similar, um, in terms of leadership skill set is if you bolt on like personal and professional issues, sometimes you have someone that's working really hard, but they're going through a lot. Maybe they're not hitting their metrics or they're not getting deals done, but you really have to have the ability to identify when someone may be down on the team or something along that. And that goes with their clientele too, to be able to lift them up when they go through some hard times, again, both professionally and personally. I think that's where you can kind of keep the retention high. And so, um,
Yeah.
I think those are some good points you made.
What do you think, Nate, about, thinking along the lines of building the utopia? What is the perfect team, the dream team? I know that's something you and I kind of talked about before. Why don't you take a stab at it? Like, tell me, what is your dream team and what does that look like? Maybe not when, but what, and maybe when, I don't know.
Yeah, I think naturally when people are in an organization where it's about performance-based things, they naturally want to create a dream team that is similar to their own skill sets. And that's what I got caught in the trap of early on, as a leader. And then as you mature, you start to realize the better way of doing it is to fill in the gaps. And so where you have skills that are lacking, like my relationship building is really good, but in terms of being detail oriented, I may be one of the worst people on the planet. And so your dream team really needs to be complementary of each other, or complementary of each other. Um, and so as I've matured, I've realized like, okay, I struggle with this. What the dream team looks like is adding someone to the team that can fill in that gap to make us excellent.
That's a great answer. It's funny because in my mind, the struggle, I have an org chart as a dream team. And in your mind, you have a concept of how you want your team to complement each other. And they both fit, right? Behind an org chart is how all those systems are working to kind of support the names that are on that piece of paper. For me, it's conceptually, I just said it a little bit ago. I think having success in our business is a numerical success. There is a billing number. There is a level that you get to achieve certain titles and roles and compensation. I want what I've been able to and blessed to experience for everybody that currently is on my team. What that means is a very significant growth. What that means is alongside the growth, let's just say there's 7 people. That's about right. 7 people that could be different service lines in Lee's team right now, and Team North is renowned. If each of those 7 become a version of what Lee Martin is today and our Team North is today, the infrastructure under each of them, the support of each of them, the entrepreneurial feel and the way they've created their teams, each of their units will be theirs to own, just like mine has been, right? And spawning some of that now and seeing it start to kind of create its own environment, subsects within mine is such a joy. I can only imagine once that really starts to take off, right? You've seen it in your own group. We've seen it here in our practice. When you see someone doing it better, the way that doing it their way and doing it better and faster and having success, it's a joy to see. It's exciting because we have so much to offer them. So my dream team, I think, looks like me times however many, and even the next person comes in, and me having an opportunity to support them in doing it their way. And that's a lot of work. It's a lot of details. It's a lot of handholding. It's a lot of investment of time and sweat equity. And that's fun. Getting there is fun, but the journey there is also going to be a lot of fun. And I think we're there now, right? We're battling and we're trying to figure out and learning, doing things we've never frankly done before. And I think the history of the practice here, in the commercial building world, it's been around since 1981. I don't think we've ever had or come close to the opportunity we'll see even in 2026. And then beyond that, it's just building upon it, right? That's my kind of dream team. It's a little all over the place. For me, it starts kind of org chart. It's the journey to getting to that org chart. and using what you've said and really complementary skill sets around me, creating the engine that can support this growth. And then within each of those different pathways, making sure that, it's right and the people are getting to kind of do it their way.
Some of the mistakes that I've made, that I'm curious to pick your brain on is, you know, as I've matured, I put a huge emphasis on the cultural aspect of the team and probably not as much weight on the capabilities part of the team. And now that we've done really well in terms of building infrastructure, in terms of team members that fit well together and we work hard, play hard, we really enjoy working together. Um, I need to get better at the capability side, especially as AI comes into the business and some other things in terms of expertise that could be added to the team. Maybe it's not looking so much at the cultural aspect because, when you bring in someone that's going to be more operation minded, uh, they may be a little more introverted than the typical recruiter. And so building that out, what are some of the mistakes that you've maybe circumvented or gone through in terms of the cultural and the capability aspects?
Yeah, no, that's great. I think when we thought about hiring, as we've done, getting it down to the weeds now in terms of how you build even the team you have, um, it's always been, I found something that worked once and I try to replicate as many times as I could. What I was doing was hiring more leads, right? You think back to, and some people back from your training class, hiring in multiples, the same thing, which was very hungry, ambitious young recruiters, young in career, not necessarily in age, but in career. And so that's what I thought worked. Let's just get people that want to work really hard, that are competitive, have an athletic feel to them, meaning I want to compete at the highest level with the best of the best. And while that can work, you can get production. It's hard to sustain because be careful when you hire someone like you, or you hire someone that has a drive that can drive them right out of here. That same ambition, the thing that makes them good and potentially a great recruiter, talented, capable, can be the reason they don't stay also. And it's an interesting thing. And so what do you do at that point? I'm proud to say that with all of those folks that I've had around, I'm very good friends with. In fact, talked to one today, and in their new lives, wherever they are, careers, one went fully into become a cop. He's the detective and has done really well. Other went in-house as a recruiter. I've had others even go completely into sales and completely different world. And we've done a really good job of keeping up. And what's interesting to me is seeing how well that they've done and how happy they are doing it their way. When they left, my thought was, I made a mistake. I didn't do enough here. Why aren't they here? They should be a partner here. And that was never the thing. That was not their utopia. That was not their dream team. Right. And so that's been the multi-year lesson as I've seen these, and the only pride that I have is in that I did maintain those relationships, those personal relationships that were very real when they were here. There's no better way to test that than to see them leave. And if that still is the case, right? If
Yeah,
when
I
someone
agree.
leaves,
I
kind of
think
where
I've
you're
seen
at.
a lot of people have a lot of success, and I think our organization does a good job of putting people in a position that if this isn't for them, they created some skill sets that they could take into their next move that could be paramount to their success. And there's things that I was exposed to in terms of our practice, in terms of setbacks, uh, that you're well aware of in terms of dysfunction, that certainly are things that were learning experiences for me. And I think a big component, and I'm curious to hear what kind of setbacks you went through, but I learned today sitting in an ivory tower is just not what moves the needle in terms of building strong, cohesive teams. And so I really come from a servant leadership mentality that if I'm going to go to war with people, I'm going to get in the trenches with them. I'm not going to be hovering in a helicopter above while we were taking bullets. Um, and so for me, it's a big piece of if I'm going to ask someone to do something, I want to be willing to do it myself. And so share with us maybe a setback or something
Yeah.
in terms of learning while being in the industry that kind of sets you and your team apart by those experiences.
Yeah. I shared a little bit of this in my intro, talking about good times, hard times. But I think a few areas that we've tried is truly trying to diversify what we do and the type of client we serve. And by type, I mean it could be geographically. Are we talking to the right people in the right economy? Are we aimed at the right type of companies? And we've had a few times when I've thought, okay, we're going to try it this way. Let's go to, I'm going to use this as a generic example, but we're going to go to the state of Iowa. We want to do a lot more work there, as a for instance. And given it a few early attempts, and then not really leaning into a real strategy around how do I make this a true investment of a multi-year true business to stand up and not have it be give up so easily and so quickly. We've had a few different times when we've tried that. I've said, you're going to own this function, go and do this, let's grow it. And when it got a little hard, we went back to where it's comfortable. And so that, I think, understanding now, and those lessons have come with us. And so I think we're doing better at that now, at understanding and truly treating every new item, especially when you're asking someone inside of your practice to own it, treating like a true business and not just like an attempt. I think understanding too diversification as a concept. When the economy goes down, you got to be ready. You can't wait until. So you need to be having an idea in mind of where tides can turn and how you can navigate those before they ever happen. And that's something I think we've gotten better at. And I think about as I talk to our clients, right, in the market, before they go out and hire, when they're thinking about their scale, when they think about scalability in terms of their businesses, what is my guidance and my advice to them ever? What do we talk about when we talk about clients having their own hiring setbacks or building their own teams? It's culturally driven. To your point, it's the ivory tower mentality, not really, having an environment where there's transparency, where leadership is involved. They have an ear to the people, where they're driving and leading from the front. There's work ethic, there's open office environments, there's collaboration. So with my clients, the things that we talk about when we have a script and we're leading for an executive search, the things we sell about good companies are the things that I've had to learn to do well with my own team internally too. And it's crazy, right? Because the gospel we preach sometimes really applies to us. And so for me, I think both externally, when you think of clients and our professional service we provide them, and me internally, it's understanding early how to project how things could go wrong, looking for the bad before it's here, diversifying well, and then not giving up too soon, and really committing and leaning into it. And it's a luxury at times, because financially, sometimes you can't, right? I mean, you can't just go walk on the street and start a business and have unlimited funds if you don't have unlimited funds to be able to support it. So there's a heavy component of that. But that's some of the stuff that I feel like I've seen in my business and what we see sort of in our marketplace a little bit. What about you?
Yeah, sometimes it sounds like between the two, when you looked at our issues, it was more culturally related, and yours is more strategy related. And if you have both issues, it's a big problem. If you have one issue, it's a lot easier to deal with. And I think it's just, again, having an understanding of what the problem is and what the solution can look like. And a lot of time it's learning and living it. Because in our situation, you look at top performers, and in the insurance brokerage space, they have a really good formula for what that looks like. And sometimes you have to look at your team and say, what a good producer looks like inside of insurance brokerage, but is your behavior similar to that, or would you even recruit yourself? And it's that self-awareness piece. And that's another thing, like, and that self-awareness is huge. And that brings me to my next question. Speaking of red flags, what are some red flags that, you feel like interviewers, or maybe even yourself, when you're interviewing someone, that sometimes you miss and that you've learned to catch or need to work on catching?
Man, I wish I had a perfect answer to this. I wish I knew the formula. I think that I don't think I know some of the things that we've seen pre-hire that we potentially could have looked for. Has a lot to do with the person's ultimate goal, what they want for themselves long term. So I talked a little bit about this a few minutes ago, which was, you hire somebody, you have them to have success here, which frankly, let's be real, recruiting's a low barrier of entry. You could walk off your high school diploma stage or graduation, you can come do this. You can have a doctorate, after 20 years of schooling and practicing and residency, and you can come do this. You can go to law school and you can come do this. So a lot of people can do it. A lot of people get started. Understanding what people want for themselves personally has a lot to do with their long-term success here. And I think about you, Nate. What did Nate want when Nate came to Kaye Bassman? I think of the people that I've hired, and where if you were to think of red flags, I would say if someone doesn't have a real plan for themselves, beyond just I want to get there and make a lot of money, because that's why you want a job. That's why you come into a sales and recruiting type job, because it's got high potential. If it's that simple, that could be a red flag. I'd like to think there are no real red flags, and some people maybe just don't have the professional maturity yet to think of a long-term vision for themselves, right? And that's what we can help them with. But it's nice when you can think of and ask questions and get a clear answer. I'll give you an example. I just hired somebody that hasn't started yet. Don't know how it's going to go. So we'll see. Maybe we'll do another version in a year and look back, right? But I asked, what do you have coming? And actually, the last two people that I've hired, one that's been here years having tremendous success, had some things in life that he wanted to accomplish, personal financial goals, family goals. All of those were converging on this opportunity is something that I don't only want, but I kind of need, right? I need this. I've got to make this successful. Gentleman that I just hired that hasn't started yet, that was the previous guy. The one that I just hired that will start soon just got engaged, wants to buy a home, wants to, he has these things that are huge motivators. We talk about our why all the time. I mean, it's our favorite word. What is your why? Why are you doing this? If you can tap into someone that's got that sort of figured out, I think that's a huge green flag. Orange or red flags maybe prohibited, maybe if they don't fully have that quite yet. So that's my simple answer. It's long-winded, but I feel like that's something you can look for. If I think of my clients, it's similar. And, with them, they're a professional services, but in a very different type of way. There's a lot more technical components there to them and how they filter people with us. It's raw talent you look for. But with them, they have very deliberate ways that they try to map in-house. And so they use their own collateral and professional assessments to say, we know what works here. We know what works for our culture. And if someone goes against that and we have a way of testing that, red flag. And so they've got more systemic things. They just do tests, assessments, personality. They try to guess their way into it using help. And I think that's valid. I think it's very real. And I've heard more than one client tell me at times when they've gone against it and said, no, we're going to use our gut on this one, not go with what we're reading on this paper that says this person is not like the person you want to hire to be successful in this role. And they said, no, we think that they are. They've been wrong. And it's proven. So that's weirdly that, an industrial kind of emotion thing in terms of the way people workflow and hire people and bring them in. But I do like that. And I think there's a way you can help yourself in those scenarios when you just don't inherently have the tools or the history to point to make your own successful hiring decisions. But very curious, because your world's different than mine. So I'm curious what you think in terms of, red flags pre-hire for your own team, your client base. What do you look for?
It's definitely different in terms of that evaluation piece. And, most of the time from my client side of things, they're very entrepreneurial like us. And so the way to create some synergy between an experience that I had with an individual that came into my team that I could evaluate based off of the successes that some of my clients have had, and their evaluation between green and red flags was Nazrin, who's a partner that obviously that's done excellent in terms of being the yin to the yang of creating the resiliency and the growth that we've had. But I remember when she came in, and she came from a really large search firm, and so she's it's not often that we get to interview someone that came from our world and has some experience in that. The issue was that organization restricted her in terms of the entrepreneurial spirit. It was so large that there was a lot of corporate red tape in terms of what you could do day in and day out. Mm-hmm. And she had a really entrepreneurial spirit. And I knew our infrastructure is not robust, and she would have the runway to have more of an entrepreneurial spirit. And so my evaluation of that was, this is a green flag because I can provide that to her. Now, the warning sign was, hey, we don't have the infrastructure that you're used to. So you're going to do a lot of the blocking and tackling yourself, opposed to having someone underneath you doing all the research and all the outreach, and then you just getting on the phone and making things happen based off your expertise. My clients do the same thing. For example, you may have someone that is at one of the largest insurance brokerages in the world, and a lot of their success has come by virtue of the brand,
Mm-hmm.
not the influence or the value proposition or the expertise. And so I know that my clients see it as a red flag if there's too much emphasis on the brand recognition and less on what they bring to the table as an individual. And so they're going to red flag that. I'd oftentimes say that could be similar here, but we'd evaluate it from the lens if I was hiring internally and someone's worked at a really large organization that has tons of corporate layers of management and they're supported a million different ways. Our world and the way we've created this company, and this is why we pay well and we give a lot of upside in terms of becoming an owner in the company, is very entrepreneurial. And so I want to know that someone is it's a corny term, but they're a self-starter. I want to know they can manage themselves well. I'm not a good micromanager, so I want to know they're very entrepreneurial. And in a lot of ways, I evaluate their upbringing as well, because I think that has a lot to do with personality traits and self-awareness too. So if someone comes across like you, if you look at my algorithm is built a lot on, um, high performers. And so a lot of people interviewing will take someone into a restaurant to see how they interact with the server. We do some of that as well. And it's always a red flag for me if someone treats the president of a company one way, but then they'll treat the janitor a different way. I think they should all be treated the same. And so it's a red flag if you see some behavioral issues like that or entitlement. Um, so thanks for sharing, but that's the way I kind of handle things from
So
my
I'm
side.
curious, is there any one story where you went against some of what we've learned and we're so wise and hindsight's 2020 or whatever, right? But any stories of like, yeah, shit, I knew better and I did it anyway from a hiring perspective. And here's what happened. I have one with one of my clients too. And um I yeah. So I'm curious if you have any, maybe it's a
I
client.
think I think sometimes when we're personally hiring, like sometimes hiring friendships where it's a cultural alignment, um, and you want to give someone a shot, but the track record should tell you differently. So you're too emotionally invested in the situation. Um, I think as a leader, you should always have a lens on that looks through things very analytically instead of emotionally.
Yeah.
And I'm getting better as I grow older at looking through things factually opposed to emotionally.
Yeah.
And I think that certainly has served me well. And so an example is I made a hire that was someone that was close to me, and their track record showed that it was going to be difficult. And they didn't have a lot of thrust in terms of activity. And as you know, to make it in this industry and any sales
Mhm.
environment, you need to. The intellect was there, um, but they were always going to struggle just based off activity. And I knew that from the jump, and I ignored it.
Mhm. Yeah, that the more the merrier concept that we have here a lot, which is kind of anybody can come and try to do what we do, can get us in trouble. I think checks and balances, I think what one thing I've learned here internally, I have some partners that I trust implicitly to say, am I doing this right? Is what I'm doing and about to do, even the moments when things are going well, am I being too aggressive? And then from a hiring perspective, one example of with one of my clients is we were so sure because of how highly sought after this candidate was. So multiple offers, young hotshot candidate goes into my client, but we were the last company to interview, which means we had a two-step process to interview. I convinced them that we were going to lose this candidate if we didn't do it all in one go and skip over their process, which takes two interviews and is very deliberate. Great interviewing company, very, very good from a hiring perspective, amazing retention. And they did it. And he was gone inside of a year. And so it's interesting because the math was 1 + 1 = 2. It was right there. And I ignored it. They ignored it. because of me. And that was some influence that I had that I used and cashed that in. And it ended up being, he was there long enough that he had some productivity, but it wasn't what we want. We want lifers. We want partners. We want meaningful impact on organizations, right? In my own, I would say less from a true new hire perspective and more from what I've done with people when they've been here, promoting to putting into certain roles, right? And I think what candidly, I talked about some of my early the economic turns and tides and shrinking down to being very few people and just kind of me a couple of those years where I was just producing solo and we're going back to 2016, 2015, and even before that 2008, 2009. My fear built out of seeing those times and understanding what it was like to kind of go at this thing alone meant I didn't want to have to be in that spot again. I wanted to give more, be super benevolent, almost to the point of maybe doing too much. And so that's what I ended up doing. When I finally found something that I really, really liked, right? Post hire, had been here, worked hard, had all the right things that you would say that's a good employee. What I wanted for that person and what I wanted for myself was to keep that person. What I wanted for that person was to have success here. The reality was that it was never the right thing for them or me. But I was so fearful because I'd lost people before, because I'd been in those moments when I had good people. Why aren't they here anymore? I really want that. I want to build a team. Let's go. And what I instead did was empowered incorrectly. I think I put too much too fast and sort of overemphasized some moments that I thought were good for success and were maybe good, but they were very fleeting. And I knew that. So for me, it was like, how do you position people? Hiring is like promoting. It's like reshuffling the deck in house. It's like putting people in certain seats. You got to do it for the right reasons, because that's the right thing for them and for the organization ultimately, which is us, me and you, right? We run our organizations internally. So, yeah, a little bit of the ambition mixed with a little bit of probably PTSD, right? Built into what had happened or what I'd been through before. But I guess that's the name of the game. That's also the beauty of what we do. We have the ability to fail on our way as many times as we need or want. That's what's cool about this truly entrepreneurial company. We have those moments and we can do it. And then we can also learn from it. And we got the support to try it again. So thankfully those were not career ending injuries, but they kept me honest, and certainly it's humbling. And, we've kind of learned and grown from there.
I think when you look at the experience that I've had with the clients, it's helped me understand top grading at a high level because it's so similar to our industry. And, what I've learned is when you have A players, you get behind them and you say, I'm here when you need me, but I'm not going to micromanage you and I'm going to be a resource for you. And then you may have B players. Those are typically the people that are going to perform, but the A, it's just embedded in their DNA to perform at a high level. So you just don't want to get in their way and bog them down. And the B players are usually people that are usually really good at being intricate parts of the team and kind of the glue to the team because they're not selfish. They usually give back. They're willing to help train people and they don't expect anything from it. And then those C players are typically the people you do need some micromanage around. But I think organizations really struggle with the balance of that. I find that some of the places we pull people from to add to our clientele are the organizations that struggle with the top grading approach. And it looks like you got someone that is always, without any oversight, going to produce at a high level. However, you have them in meetings all the time and you have them bogged down with intricate parts of the business that their skill set's not aligned for. And so as we look at kind of, lessons that have been learned, those are lessons that I've learned from our clients that I try to implement internally in terms of the top grading approach. And we talked about resiliency earlier. When you go through those down times that we're sure to have, especially in your world with construction, it's based off the economy. What do you think are some things you put in place for you guys to be resilient? Is it the
Great question.
diversification?
It's funny because we're an EOS organization now. And so a lot of the things that you and I both, I'm sure, thought of and did versions of and implemented has been tested across many organizations now, because you see it in this book and in this concept of the entrepreneurial operating system, right? Which is what are the drivers of a successful team? And it's not just a concept and a feeling. There's like actions and steps that you take. And some of those that I'll just pull out quick sound bites is, the style and types of meetings that we have. We have group meetings where we talk about what we need to talk about, where we drive the process forward. We have not a lot of, but we have meaningful one-on-one and deliberate meetings for check-in points. So the two types of meetings that we have, and that's kind of all we have outside of just doing our job regularly, which is a lot of meetings, is to simplify it. And that is, I'm spending time one-on-one, face-to-face, at least once a quarter, for the purposes of check-in and for delivering accountability, feedback, production, and looking at, are we doing what we want to do for each other mutually? Biannually, we're doing it from a true review perspective internally. And we're doing one-on-ones. And sometimes it's over a meal, sometimes it's a walk, it's a cup of coffee, sometimes a virtual meeting. But what it is an honest and direct conversation. Can it happen more frequently? Of course. But communication is structured. There's deliberate check-in points. There's preparation for those meetings so that we can understand fully if the person and me, or me and the person, are doing for each other and for our clients, for our team, what we said we would do. And if we're not, why not? And how can we be better? And it's an AOS concept, right? What are your rocks? What's your vision? How is all of this built in? Because, and they, in extreme ownership, those Navy SEALs, they talk about everyone on the team, everyone in the unit, when they're going into a battle in a very high density, high risk environment, you don't have the ability to guide and manage anybody. Everyone just has to know so well what their piece of the business is, or what their piece of the mission is. And how do you do that? How do you ensure everyone is on the same page? You don't write on a piece of paper and email it out in January and say, good luck, everyone. Hope everyone does what we said we would do. It's reflective. You talk about it, you set goals. We talk, and then we revisit those as we go and do, pit stops. You're an F1 guy, you're a big fan. So those pit stops, when you do them, how you do them, it's a strategy, right? Because you all want to win the race. Everyone has that similar goal, but how everyone gets there is going to be different. And it's a coach and it's a mutual communication when they're talking on the walkie-talkies during the race. So for us, it's similar in that we want to be able to have clear accountability. We want to be able to have check-in points to revisit that. And it's not just me to employee, it's employee to me. And it's, okay, do we need to correct this? Do we pick wrong early on? Because we made that with limited information in January, and here we are, and it's June, and that strategy doesn't work. Do we need to pivot? So what have I learned, and what do I do to create the resiliency inside of the team, and being very deliberate is built around kind of the communication pattern that we've created. By no means perfect. It's a developing concept, but it seems to be working a lot better. And in turn, I think you and I would appreciate this. We have a great relationship with Jeff Kaye. We have a great relationship with Dan and Ryan. We probably have versions of this with them. Nick Turner and I too, we talk. It's nice to hear sometimes what you're doing is the right thing. It's nice to know sometimes what you're thinking about, not just from people that you're around all the time, but for someone else that doesn't really have a clear stake in what you're doing. Jumping into your world and saying, yeah, that's actually right. This is what you said you wanted. And I think what you're doing is the right thing. So I do some of that myself too, because I owe it to my team to be the better version of myself than I was the day before. So those are becoming some of my lessons and some of the things that I try to throw in there.
Yeah, I love that you brought up the F1 thing, because if you look at it, everyone is in the same race.
Mm-hmm.
But the teams have different strategies, and sometimes it makes them efficient. And it's obviously the talent based off of some brand recognition that certainly helps them, but there's definitely an emotional toll that can come from a race where you did everything perfectly, but the car let you down. It had a blowout or something along those lines. And so we've both gone through some of that in terms of building or producing or experiences with clients. And so I wanted to ask you kind of how you deal with some of that because I definitely think that's probably the toughest part of entrepreneurship and building stuff or helping build a company. And so a good example of something that I've gone through is, again, understanding the economics and understanding that sometimes our clients are in a position where they can't do anything. And it's not a matter of what I'm doing wrong. It's, I have to evaluate it from the lens of I'm doing everything right. This is just out of my control and it's going to turn around at some point and just kind of ride that wave. And also understanding on the hiring side, there's a lot of times you hire people and you want to see them succeed worse than they want to succeed themselves. And you have to have a self-awareness that you got to let that go sometimes and let them play their part and the type of activity they want to put on. And so I know we all go through it. So like how do you combat some of those emotional roller coasters that you go in as a leader and as a producer?
Yeah, yeah. Um, it's interesting because the being honest, first of all, not doing it alone is a pretty good idea. Having someone else that can be a wife or a significant other, a spouse, it can be a mentor. Rarely does it always feel like it's the person closest to you that's also going through the same thing. Sometimes you got to get a completely different outside. You got to pull in a very clear perspective and a new lens. Um, and so those moments for me have been that. I think of two in particular during this long time, and I feel like I was at my lowest. I mean, I was like, I don't even know. One was back in 2009. I didn't know if I'd ever be able to make a single dollar again. Everything was in there. My house, my car, like we were just that bad. We say all the time, I would love to forget 2009 ever happened still, and it's 2026. We're at, year 17. I could have had a kid then and be sending them to college. That's how long ago this was, but I remember it. The other was 2020, the pandemic. There was a moment there where I felt like I had a lot of kind of weight to carry because I kept my team together. I kept the payroll, like I kind of kept everything right over here on these shoulders. And I felt like I had to continue to carry. And then, but in my mind, I'm like, is this imposter syndrome? Am I the right person to really take this forward? Do I even know how to make a placement anymore? I remember sitting at lunch and talking to my mentor in that moment. And, we were emotional. I was emotional. I said, I don't know if my voice matters right now in our team, in our group, in this company. I'm not good at this right now, and the reality it was the environment. The illusion of control is crazy in our world.
Yeah, what's Jeff always say? It's some of the best advice I've ever gotten. You're never as good as you think you are when you're at the top, and you're never as bad as you think you are when you're at the bottom.
And yet we will buy the hype. I'll buy high all the time, but also, and that's the thing, I think in many of those moments, thinking back, I don't forget, and I try to really keep that with me. And especially when I approach anything, when we're celebrating and all that, it really is a moment. It always takes me back and just, I try to express a lot of gratitude as much as I can to where I am, to God and to my family and to everything else, because at the end of the day, that can all go away. It's nice now. Everything's great. Um, we're not bulletproof. We're just not. So those are the times that I've said I've been introspective. I've been honest. You don't have any choice but to be when you're at your lowest. You're honest. It's one thing you are, and if you're not, you probably got way worse and you're not at your lowest, right? But I've learned there. What about you? What have you, when you've had just those moments when you're like, I'm at a rock bottom, this is it, single hardest professional or personal moment, probably professional for these purposes, but what do you think? What's gotten you through? What lessons have you learned?
Well, I think they're in conjunction with each other. So I'd actually say it's designed for us to talk about the business aspect, but the the personal aspect affects it so much for me. And so, I've had a lot of loss since I was really young. I've lost people really close to me. Um, since I was really young. Matter of fact, my daughter is named after my best friend that I lost at 17 years old. And so I'd say trying to build a team and keep my head on straight without spiraling when me and Corey had two stillbirths was probably the hardest point for me,
Or,
in
yeah.
terms of business. And so I would come in and you know you're doing what you love when it can become a distraction in
Mm-hmm.
such hard
Mm-hmm.
times. And so I really leaned on,
Amen.
people were blown away that I was in the office 2 days after having a stillbirth at 6.5 months. But it was a really raw moment for me to realize like I can turn the world off and everything that I'm going through mentally and just focus on moving the needle in terms of the business side. And then, when the day would come to a close in terms of close of business, here, the world would hit me like a ton of bricks again. But that's, I think, the defining moment when I realized I really loved what I do and wanted to do it forever. And so it was the hardest thing that I had ever taken on, uh, personally, but it also was in unison with me trying to build in a prime moment, um, in this business. And so I'd say that. And then if it's just purely professionally driven, I'd say hiring and we're very entrepreneurial. So you're losing a lot of money sometimes. And sometimes you just want to, say screw it and say, I'm just going to be a singular producer and give up on it. And that's where things came full circle. And I found a Nazarene and she was a great complement to the practice and that yin and yang approach. So it's just keep swinging away and keep swinging away as you see really successful people, especially startups and people that are investors. They've lost. We don't see all the money that they've lost and the time they lost. We see them hit big on one thing and it just, especially with social media showing us all the success that people are having. We're not seeing things on the back end. So we have to stay focused and realize that how we perceive things is not actually how they have typically played out. And so it's just keeping your head down when you're going through both professional um, and personal issues.
Yeah. Comparison to anyone else's situation is just it's so unfair to you, right? You just don't know. You're not living with that person. And that's why I think too, the people that are close to you from a business perspective, you with Nazar and myself with my entire group, um, sometimes having a perspective that's not inside of your world because we're so tightly knit and having to row together and sort of sometimes that does help to bring levity to the whole thing. And speaking of levity, I think also as much as I think we've covered some of the what's not been great. Well, there are some great stories and some really interesting things along retention and success stories that we've had, which I think is a nice segue into okay, so what is going well? Like what is out of all these things that we've experienced, right? Personally, professionally, we've had these down moments. We've had our years. We've got combined 36 years, which is crazy. Um, what does it mean to keep good people around and beyond just money, right? Like what's the A-player retention secret, Nate? What can we tell people about what's good about what we do in that respect?
Well, I think in our world and even in my client's world, it is a part of compensation, but it's skin in the game. And so if
Mhm.
someone is meaningful to your organization, you have to find a way to give them some sort of equity component. Otherwise, you're going to lose them. They're going to go start their own company and they're going to do it well and they're going to make a lot of money. And so it's that law of abundance thinking. I
Mhm.
think, secondly to that, some people aren't driven by compensation. Some people are driven by impact. I use my sister as an example, who is the assistant dean of Texas Women's University. She is very driven by impact. If the money comes, that's a cherry on top. But where she gets inspiration is what she's doing for others. And so I think you have to have a good pulse on your A players and what drives them. Sometimes it's a mixture of both. I want to get paid for my efforts, but I
Mhm.
certainly want to have a voice and have influence. And so I think it's our job as leaders to find, again, we've referred to seat oftentimes because of EOS and just understanding there's got to be a place for people, and if you're not providing that for them, you're not going to retain them. And so it's that constant transparency and communication to what's next. The worst thing that could ever happen to you if they come into your office and say, what's next? You should be always approaching them before they approach you on what something looks like for them moving forward and driving that introspective thought so you stay in front of it as a good leader to retain them. And so I know you've done a lot of that as you've been building your thing. We're doing some of that. So I'd love to hear kind of an example of you've made Will a partner recently. Like, what are your goals and what are some of your team's goals to
It's a
retain
great
them?
question. We spent a lot of time on this, understanding that, we talked about it early in the call, which was like, what's your dream team? Well, my dream team is a compilation of a bunch of individuals saying what they want. And me saying, all right, if we put all that together, this is the vision, right? This is the dream team. This is the aha, kumbaya, celebrate moment. What does that look like? Well, what do you want? What do you want? What do you want? Right? Let's go around the room. Um, so some of that. So understanding, to your point, what is the true motivator? But for me, it also has been the understanding that if I hire somebody that's a new graduate from college, and I use this all the time in my interview prep for candidates, when you go in and you're going to go interview and you have experience, even a year of experience. So you're 22, you graduate college, you're 23, after 1 year at a company, you're interviewing. You are a weapon at that point. When you're coming out of college, you get a degree, you get general studies, you think you know what you want to do, unless you did an internship or have a family member or someone that's really guided you and really directed you to do something. You're kind of an open book. You're saying, which company's going to choose me, right? I'm going to go to a job fair. They're going to come to my career fair. I'm going to select. When you're in a year, and every year after you become more of an advanced version of yourself, you develop a palate, you develop an appetite, you start to know. So you're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you. You're understanding what it is you want if it aligns with your goals. But if you don't know how to do that, meaning you're 22 and you're coming out of college, who's going to show you? Who's going to teach you other than just experience itself? With my group, understanding that I've got someone in my team that's older than me, that had an entire career, then had a second career in recruiting that's here now. I've got someone that literally had no professional experience, only college and bartending, that's here now, who's 24 years old, and everything in between. And so what do I do with the different phases of life and really trying to guide and understand what retention looks like, meaning helping them fulfill what they want. And I use that word fulfill on purpose, because that is what fulfillment looks like, is getting what you want, being happy with it, not just content and satisfactory, but happy and excited about it, and putting some of that together. That's the challenge, is guiding those people, asking the questions. A good consultant, a good coach, a good therapist is going to ask you questions to get you there yourself, right? So asking those questions, making sure that I'm honest, I'm giving feedback, I'm helping to guide the very plans that I'm going to take. And I'm going to say, let's put all these together. This is where we're going, guys, all together. And in our L10 meetings, which are our weekly operations meetings, and around EOS, that's what it is. Our entire vision is, what are we all doing? If someone's not, well, how are we not? How are we addressing that? And what are we doing? And is that a breakout with me and that person? Is that a team environment kind of thing where we talk about it openly and we can encourage and get more minds involved? But retention to me looks like a collaboration. It's not just, hey, what do you want for yourself? Okay, that's what we're going to do. I've got the experience, I've got the life experience and professional to be able to help that person collaborate, create something that, could change, but maybe not too terribly much, right? And working in the personal, working in the life, the why, and seeing if we can come up with something that really makes a lot of sense, and something that we can create some accountability and some motivation around. That's the retention. It's not a magic. There is no one answer. It is work. It's being deliberate. It's being supportive, a lot of communication, and pouring yourself into the people that you care about the most internally, so that they can feel that, they have someone that truly supports them. And that's a feeling that I haven't always had. And, at times I've almost felt like I've been doubted in terms of what I can do and my capabilities here, from people that probably should have known better. And so sometimes I think of that and some of the lessons I've learned, and said, I don't ever want to be the person that doesn't over believe and over encourage in a way, in a healthy way, in a supportive way, the people that to do what they want to do.
Yeah, it's more of that law of abundance and having your ear to the situation at all times. Like, I have a client that at first you may think it's like corny when they use job, joy of being, or habu, highest and best use, but when you're living it, it's not very corny. Um, because it, I think, is a good intentional piece for you to realize that you're all in this together. Yeah, other people at times in their career, some people are in different drastically different points in their life, economically, professionally, and personally. But as long as you're communicating, I think through this whole session, it was a lot about transparency and then communication. I think where organizations go when I'm coaching clients, it's like without that level of vulnerability, instead of saying this is where we struggle and we need to get better, oftentimes a job or an organization oversells who they are because it's become such a hot thing to say culture, culture, culture. And I don't, you think about like culture. Is it being able to wear shorts to work or bring your dog to work? Or is culture really about how you're making people feel around you and together? And I think what's meaningful is culture should be about that over, fun little perks that an organization has, which I think have, uh, you know, validity and are
Yeah.
paramount to success, but it doesn't carry as much weight as how you make people feel within an organization. And so that's really what I focus on when I'm talking to clients as well.
It's interesting because lately, the one thing, and I keep pointing back to EOS because so much of that is what we're talking about right now, but uh, we had a hard time finding a time to celebrate, like a good month or a good quarter. We went like months later, we figured out a time. And part of it's because just logistically, we have people spread out and want to try to be together. But we have no problem finding ways to be able to do that. It's being able to be deliberate about that and really taking those moments. And I thought, how funny. We used to have no problem celebrating all the time, even when we didn't need to be. But like now it's one of those like, okay, I need to get everyone together. We need to appreciate the moment, not just push, 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 push. And this is everyone on the same page, really wanting, and take a moment and find the time to celebrate, prioritize it just like we do everything else. And I think part of kind of the culture and some of the things that we've done as the pendulum swung to now bigger and more sophistication and driving more towards bigger and really pretty audacious goals is not forgetting some of the things that I think were fun when you worked smaller, when you were a little more simple in just the entire work environment. It's what the magic is here at Starfish, at Kaye Bassman. And, it's something I got to keep reminding myself to make sure I'm not forgetting. As a part of the culture that we're trying to dive. That has to do with retention, has to do with just overall fun, and frankly, we deserve it. So, if you think about, Nate, one big takeaway, right? Like, what's the thing that, from a team building perspective, right? What separates the good teams from the great, right? Jim Collins, Good to Great. What is that great thing, soundbite, few line? What is the thing that you think you would leave with everyone about you and your team and kind of what you've learned?
That's a great question. I think you have to put a lot of thought into that, but just my gut instinct to answer that is again, it's going back to don't that servant leadership component. If I had known earlier on that it wasn't about me, it was about the conglomerate of the team and us supporting others. And again, the law of abundance, it would have gone a lot better earlier
Mhm.
had I come from that perspective. And I think naturally when you're younger and you're in a sales environment, you think about yourself too often. And then as you realize
Yeah.
the fun part, like today, when my kids open presents for Christmas, it makes me tear up. I could care less what I've gotten.
Mhm.
And so as I've developed, I think as a leader, you should have a passion around other people winning more than yourself.
Yeah.
And if I had known that earlier on, it would have gone a lot better. And so the biggest piece that I would leave with anyone is like, be really passionate about watching other people win and be their biggest cheerleader and support them in every way possible. And, sometimes it's going to be disappointing because things aren't going to go as planned. But if they see you really care about them more than yourself, um, you'll find that you love that more too as well.
It's motivating. I can echo almost exactly what you just said. I love the idea of watching other people win and being just authentic, living your authentic self as a professional, and learning to be that way. It's not as a producer in any sales environment, specifically in recruiting, the idea is personal production at first and for a long time. So learning to decentralize that thought and lean into it, be intentional about it and being authentic. You fake it for a minute, maybe, and then it becomes who you are. And getting to that point, I think also for me to bolt on to one more, just a concept, it's the journey itself. We are an organization built on big wins. You way more than me. Your deals are mega deals, several 100,000. We're like average fee, 40,000, 30,000, 35, and so if all you do is live for those mountaintop moments, for those deals, and all you do is worry about the placement, which is the last 10 minutes of a 90-minute session, right? You are probably not going to have a lot of fun doing this. For me and for our team, you got to celebrate. There's something to celebrate probably every day, professionally, and leaning into embracing the fun of what we actually do, the conversation, the lives we impact, the people. I got a resume today. I had a really good call. I got hung up on. That's funny, right? Like getting there, loving the game, being the LeBron who's doing it after 23 years, who's still transferred to a team because he wants to win another ring and he's going to put in the work and he's in the off season doing all, and I'm not a LeBron guy, but I respect what he does because he's figured out how to have a lot of fun with the journey, how to play basketball. Russell Westbrook, who's still looking for a team. He knows he's probably not going to win another championship. He'll make some more money, but he's got a lot of it. What is he doing it for? He loves the game. He loves what he's doing. He loves competing. He wants to dunk on someone tomorrow. And I want to dunk on someone every day in our business. I want to have that moment of feeling like we had something. We had a good call. So wanting to really appreciate and enjoy the journey, doing with other people that you love. And to your point, watching other people win, I'm good. I can sleep well at night. And that's what I want. And in my older age now, I'm in the second chapter of my career, probably the back half of it, which is crazy to say. I want just a lot more of that as much as I can get. I don't see myself ever stopping that either. So that's my takeaway.
Yeah, I love that your focus is on realizing throughout the journey, it's not just about the placement or the end deal. And I think that's relative to everything. When you're trying to get in shape, you have to fall in love with the journey, not the end result.
100%.
When you're in a relationship with a significant other, it's a journey. It's not just about the marriage. It's what you're doing throughout the relationship. And so that's a great takeaway in terms of, how we should look at this business, because there is a lot of ups and downs, and the best way to weather this stuff is by the unity component and support that we can get from each other throughout the journey.
Thanks for tuning in to the Executive Eye by DRI. Stay connected with us for more insights on leadership and industry trends. Follow the Executive Eye on LinkedIn or visit our website at directrecruiters.com. Until next time, keep your eye on executive leadership.